thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
Glad to, always, Shannon.
I thought it would be super exciting because I get asked constantly about like how I created Talk to Entities, and I've like looked at Access and how you created Access, and I was hoping that we could talk about, number one, like how you empowered me through the years with Talk to the Entities.
Well, first of all, it's like I encouraged you to do what was easy for you. Because what everybody tells you to do is like you have to do this, this, and this. And so like you went to art school and they told you that you had to become a commercial artist. And commercial art was never going to be your thing. And it's like, and they were like discouraging you from doing the artwork because you weren't commercial enough. And they wanted you to change you to fit their reality. And that's where most people function from. And it's like, I don't have that point of view. My point of view is you need to see what you're good at, and then you need to find out how to use that. So, I mean, you came home from art school, and you sat down with me, and you said to me, okay, I have some questions, okay? I have a really important question for you. I said, what? Are you pregnant? And you go, no, not that. You know, it's like, I said, oh, okay. What is it? And she said, well, one of the things I've noticed is that, you know, it's like all the people in Access have these clear eyes. Yeah. And it's like, and all the people in Access are happier than other people. Yeah. So what's the question? So do you get that when you do Access? I said, yeah, mostly. Most people do. And you said, well, then I want to do Access. And I went, okay. How's your mom going to feel about that? And we both knew.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, and your mom was not happy about it. And you said, okay, now that I'm doing Access, it's like you did it for a while and you're saying, what do I need to do? And I said, you know, put an ad in the paper, you know, and put all of life comes to me with ease and joy and glory, and, you know, and see what happens.
Yeah. I like to say that like when Gary started doing Access, and then I'm going to include myself, even though I didn't start, he was all by himself for a while. Like when we started doing Access, it was like the Wild West. There was no rules, there was no form, there was no structure. There was just, how are we going to create this?
How are we going to create it? Yeah. And it's like, and the thing is, that's actually how you create a business. Okay. It's like, there's no form, there's no structure, there's no significance. There's the Wild West of how do we do this? And you have to function from that point of view. And you said to me, I went, so what, you know, it's like, you called me up at one point and said, my apartment is full of entities from all these people being here. And blah, 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 blah. I go, okay, so what if you use that to create your business?
And this is what I would really love to talk about, because I have been so I've oftentimes wondered so Talk to the Entities, just for anybody who doesn't know, is an Access Consciousness specialty class. It's a specialty class that I created, but I sort of created it with you.
Yeah.
And with a bunch of entities. And
well, it's like, that's what other people don't get, is you can have entities that help you create stuff.
And it was like, I noticed that there were all these entities around, and at first I was like, I've been aware of ghosts since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I have a book called Talk to the Entities, and in the stories, it's all that. And it was when I dropped out of art school and I moved back down to Santa Barbara, where I grew up and where we were living at the time. And I was like, okay, so I would actually like to do Access. And my apartment filled up with so many ghosts that like I couldn't see the other side of the room. And I called you up and you were like, what if you could work with that? And that was just sort of like this, like, what are you talking about, weirdo? Why would I want to work with this?
Yes. But I hate talking to them. I said, yeah, but they like talking to you.
Yeah, and like I had no ambitions to be like a ghost whisperer or a psychic or anything. I thought that was weird and freaky, and
she was young.
And I was 20, maybe 20, 21.
You were 21 or 22, yeah.
And this story is actually in my book, and I tell this story a lot about that day when my house filled up with so many ghosts I couldn't see the other side of the room, like literally.
Yeah.
And I called you up, and you were like, "That's great. Like, what if you could use this?" And I was like, "No!" And I like refused.
Yes.
And then the next 3 months, my life just got horrible.
Got harder. It got harder.
It got harder and harder. And then I was out at your house one night for dinner complaining about my hard life.
Yeah.
And you were like, "What did you refuse to do?"
Yeah.
And I realized in that moment I had refused to talk to the entities.
Yeah.
And so from that point forward, I that was when the door really opened, and you really
Actually, the door really opened when you asked, how do I create my business? And then the universe showed you. And we don't get that the universe is always trying to show us how we can create our business if we ask the question. And it's like, but we don't, it's like if it doesn't come in the packaging that we've decided it has to be,
Right.
then we try to refuse it like crazy.
or not even get it. And it was so
Yeah.
interesting. Like, who would have expected like a bunch of entities to like come and like then you'd grow a multi-million-dollar consciousness business from that? Like, where do you hear about that? Like,
You don't.
Going by Braille
Yeah.
sometimes.
Well, it's like the thing is, the reality is, if you're going to create from a conscious place, you're going to do it by Braille.
So
Because there are formats that people have for how to start a business, how to do a business, what you choose, how you choose it, and all that kind of stuff. And all of those work to an extent, but they don't work as dynamically or rapidly as when you ask, how do I create this? And you allow yourself to receive the information and don't refuse it.
So can you share with us, in the beginning, I thought that talking to entities was weird, super weird. And what you did something in the beginning that I try to explain, and I sort of explain it in like, you kind of tricked me by getting like your friends to ask me for sessions and pay me.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, you did. And what it started to show me was that this was actually something that was of some value in the world.
Yeah, and it's like, and the thing is that most of us don't. It's like we have a hard time seeing what's valuable to others in the world. Because if we personally don't think it's the right thing or the valuable thing or the greatest thing, then we will try to refuse it and try to avoid it rather than going, okay, so what am I being shown? What's really possible here? And, with you, it's like I went, okay, so here. It's like, go have a session with her. I'll pay you to do it. And it's like, and they said, no, you don't have to pay me. I'll gladly do it. And they came back going, oh my God, she's so good. She has no idea. She's amazing. She is just like she's got it all going on. Oh my God. And I go, okay, cool. Would you tell her?
So I was really lucky to have that support,
Yeah.
From you initially. And I got that this was actually something that I could speak to and from in the world.
Yeah.
And you obviously, a lot of the tools in Talk to the Entities that I think are the real lifesavers, like entity clearings,
Yeah.
are entity clearing tools that you developed.
Yes.
Can you tell us how you came to those tools?
Well, it's like I was involved with a sort of psychic community, and what I noticed is these people say, "I see blah blah blah," and they could see all these things on people, and it's like, and I couldn't see. I didn't have the vision as they did.
Okay.
And it's like, and they were making me feel like a piece of shit for not having the vision, and what I did notice is that they would say you got to do this, but energetically it would speak different. So I was speaking to the energy, they were speaking to the vision. And they would look at what was visible, and I would look at what was energetic, and I could always move it energetically, and they couldn't move it by their vision. Their vision would lead them down another path that would not get rid of them.
So how did you discover who are you before that, and who will you be in the future, which is I think the most primary basic entity clearing tool that you first started developing?
I don't actually recall. I don't remember.
We
how
did
I
not
got to
rehearse
that.
this before this conversation. Then
But
here you go, the
I-
consciousness treasure. I don't recall how that came to be, actually.
I remember. I went, okay, so it's like these things would show up, and I'd go, okay, so who are you? And it's like, and they
Question.
go, question. I'd go to a question, okay, because I didn't know what else to do. Just ask them a question. So who are you? Okay, and then I realized that a ghost was stuck in a point of view. So what's the point of view they're stuck in? And they're stuck in the time where their body still is.
Right.
So it's like I had to move them out of this definition, this time. And so I asked, so who were you before that? And then who were you before that? And who were you before that? And then I could feel a shift in the energy. I said, so who will you be in the future? And that's when I realized that by asking who are you and who were you before that and who before that, it's like I was actually getting them to look at what was true for them so they could change and shift. And it's like I didn't have the point of view that an entity was wrong or bad. I had a point of view that an entity was a ghost or a spirit that was stuck.
And what's so amazing, what I think is so amazing about the entity clearing tools that we know and access, and we're just talking about sort of like the first one, but they're all sort of this easy,
Yeah.
is that you're not, we call it clearing, but in truth, you're actually facilitating the being to
Yeah.
choose something.
It's like I always had the point of view that, and I don't even know where I got this, but I always had the point of view that
We're glad you got it.
every molecule had consciousness. So it's like if you ask it a question, it will tell you something. And it's like, and I remember studying science in high school, and they were talking about how when you look at a molecule, you change its structure by observing it. And I go, what? And it's like, and they said, you're not powerful. And I go, if you're powerful enough to look at a molecule and change its structure, how powerless are you?
So it's fucking amazing. Thank you very much. Because I remember this one time when I was a kid, and we were at Catherine Bishop's summer house at Lake Arrowhead. Lake Arrowhead is in California? Nevada? California. It's a lake in California, and this is a friend of the family when I was still quite young.
Yes.
And we were at that house, and the downstairs was so haunted.
Yes.
And I remember when we were packing up to leave, you were actually downstairs, like clearing an entity.
Yes.
And I remember that at a very young age, and you just were willing to acknowledge, okay, there is a ghost here, and then talk to it. And although that is a common point of view for some people, that is definitely not the common point of view for most people.
Well, it's like also everybody goes into the trauma and drama and stuff, and it's like, and what was going on at that particular place was there was a lady who had been killed there in the 20s, and the house was from the 20s.
Okay.
And she had been killed in that house by a gangster type that owned it, and she was like 17.
Right, so she was quite stuck.
She was quite stuck, and being young and beautiful and stuck in this house and pissed as hell that nobody would talk to her.
Which happens a lot, guys.
Yeah. And so, it's like she thought you should be able to hear her and see her because from her point of view, she was still the substantial being that she had been. So I asked her for her story. And it's like, and that's one of the things I'd learned because I would have entities come to me and talk to me in the middle of the nights, and they'd be talking to me, and I go, why are you coming back?
Right.
And I said, why are you coming back? Because they would come every night and, sit in my head and talk to me. And it's like, and they were there every freaking night. And I finally went, okay, so what is it you want? Question. And it's like, and I want my Cadillac. What? What do you mean you want your Cadillac? What are you talking about? Show me everything. And it's like, and I got to the point where I was willing to let them show me their whole story. And when I did, then all of a sudden they would leave.
Right.
Or I could answer like the guy who wanted his Cadillac. I said, it's like turned out that he had been a black man with a 1956 Cadillac, convertible. And he had been driving along and he saw this young white guy on the side of the road hitchhiking, so he stopped and picked him up. And the guy had a gun, and the guy
killed him and took his car.
Well, he didn't kill him. He didn't kill him until after he made him dig his own grave.
And then he stole his car.
And it's like, and he wanted his car back. And it's like, dude, if you're going to get your car back, you're going to have to come get a new body.
Right.
What? You're going to have to get a new body. What? Where do I get a new body? Hospital. Where's the hospital? There. And I pointed him towards the hospital, and it's like he was gone instantaneously.
Which I think is just such a practical way of dealing with an area that people are so unpractical about.
Yes.
And I think I believe it's really the building off the back and standing on your shoulders that I was able to develop a whole body of work.
I was willing to tell you all this stuff. And it's like most people are not willing to listen. And that's the gift you have, is you're willing to listen. And it's like, and you're willing to look at and see how you can apply things.
Well, I don't know how much of a choice I had because I was either like be tortured to death by all the voices in my head or learn these tools and get to work and talk to the entities.
Yeah. And it's that, it's like, and I mean, it's like I've worked with people who had, who were, like in the psychotic range, quote unquote,
right,
where they were supposed to be insane asylums and that kind of stuff, and had been on massive drugs and been in straitjackets and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, and I just started asking him, so is this really your thoughts or feelings or emotions or somebody else's? And you could sense the relaxation in their body the moment I asked that question. So it's like the one thing that I learned, actually as a kid, I learned to ask questions because I always wanted to know what it was that people knew that I didn't know and how they knew it. Because I figured if I was going to create a life or create something that worked for me, I had to have that place where I could figure out how people did things. And so I always asked. And I used to ask everybody questions all the time. And my parents would pay me to shut up because I was always asking questions. But
well, I'm grateful for that
Yeah.
point of view about life, and that it's enabled so many of us
Yes.
to come out of what has driven us crazy, which is really, and that's something that you've really championed, is that awareness isn't wrong and bad.
No, and that people aren't really crazy. It's like a whole lot of people that are crazy that have, people talking in their heads. It's because they pick up. They're psychic.
Right. And so that's what really assisted, has assisted a lot of people, and also the tools of talk to the entities to recognize, like, if you're hearing voices, like, yeah, you're talking to entities.
Yeah, you're talking. You're talking to somebody. Somebody's talking to you, and you can pick that up. And it's like, and I guess partially for me, it's like, as a kid, I'd had experiences where I knew something, but I had no idea how I knew it.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured if I knew things, so what did other people know that they had never been acknowledged for? And it's been a very great gift to be able to do this stuff and to create this place where people get to see there's a different way of looking at things.
So we invite you to discover a totally different way of looking at things. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to learn more about what an easier questioning way of living can be, please check out Talk to the Entities, Access Consciousness, and see what you know that has actually been the gift that you be in the world, not the wrongness that you've been in the world.
I want to create a new product.
We're going to create a new product?
Yeah. Okay, so if you guys like this conversation and would like to hear more of these kind of conversations, like, write us a letter to Gary at Access Consciousness, and we'll start doing these things, once or twice a month, and you can subscribe to it, and if that's something that sounds interesting to you, let us know.
So what are the stories of consciousness and the conversations in consciousness that so many of you guys are hungry for and would love to be part of?
Yes.
So see you soon.
Thanks.